Sometimes the road we take isn't the one we planned, but it's the one we needed all along. A woman in white driving a classic Cadillac through the endless desert. A quiet mechanic with a past he doesn't talk about. A garage tucked between nowhere and never where broken things wait to be mended. She thought she was just passing through. He thought he'd stopped hoping long ago. Neither of them was ready for what would begin with a stalled engine. Stay with us to discover a story of second chances, quiet courage, and the kind of love that doesn't arrive with fireworks, but with grace. Before we begin, if you enjoy heartwarming stories about redemption, healing, and true connection, don't forget to subscribe. We're here every week with tales that remind us kindness still matters, and love often shows up where we least expect it. Now let's begin. Poor mechanic repaired a legendary car's engine. Then the woman who owned it offered him a company. The desert sun had long since baked the asphalt into a cracked, shimmering ribbon, stretching endlessly beneath a cobalt sky. Jack Turner squinted past the grime on his windshield, one calloused hand resting on the steering wheel of his beat-up Chevy pickup, the other reaching for the coffee that had gone cold 2 hours ago. The silence around him wasn't heavy. It was comfortable, predictable, just the way he liked it, until he saw the smoke. A thin white plume rose like a ghost from the roadside a mile ahead. Not the black, angry smoke of a crash or fire. No, this was engine smoke. Overheated, maybe coolant gone dry. Jack slowed down instinctively, eyes narrowing as the shape of the car emerged through the heat waves. A Cadillac Eldorado, 1959 by the look of it. Creamy white long as a boat chrome, tail fins slicing the desert air like it was still 1960. And standing beside it, arms crossed, sunglasses on, and heels digging into the dirt, was a woman. Jack pulled over behind the car, his truck coughing once as it settled into park. He stepped out, wiping his hands on the rag he always kept in his back pocket. "You all right, ma'am?" he called, keeping his tone even polite. He learned long ago that women stranded on highways didn't always trust the man who stopped to help, especially one with grease under his nails and a few extra miles in his face. The woman turned slowly. Her sunglasses caught the light like mirrors. Her blouse was too crisp, her posture too perfect for the middle of nowhere. She looked like someone who'd taken a wrong turn on her way to a business meeting in Manhattan. "The car started smoking," she said. Her voice was low, deliberate, like she measured every word. "I pulled over. It wouldn't start again." Jack walked to the front of the Eldorado and popped the hood, glancing at her as he did. "Classic model," he said. "She's a beauty. Not the kind of car you usually see out here." "I wasn't planning on breaking down," she said flatly. But Jack caught the slight twitch of a smile tugging at her lips. He leaned over the engine, the sweet scent of burning oil and cooked metal rising up. "Looks like the radiator's bone dry. You've been running this thing hard. Might have cracked a hose or worse." "I wasn't exactly joyriding," she said, arms still crossed. Jack closed the hood gently, turning to face her. Up close, she was striking. Mid-30s, maybe older. Her dark hair was pulled back in a loose bun, wisps escaping in the breeze. Despite the heat, she looked composed except for her eyes. There was something behind them, something tired. "Name's Jack Turner," he offered, extending a hand. The woman hesitated. Then with the smallest sigh, she reached out. Her grip was firm. "Charlotte," Jack echoed. "You've got two options. One, I can give you a lift back into town, and we can get a tow out here. Or two, I can tow her myself to my shop. Garage is about 10 miles that way." Charlotte looked down the empty road. Nothing but dust and distance. "Which one gets her running again sooner?" He smiled faintly. "My way." She nodded. "Then let's go." The garage was nothing special. Just a wide tin-roof building squatting behind a gravel lot surrounded by rusted-out relics and skeletons of old trucks. But Jack kept it clean where it mattered, tools in perfect rows, floor-swept machines humming like old friends. He backed the Cadillac and gently careful not to jostle her any more than necessary. Charlotte stepped out of the truck, eyeing the place. "Charming," Jack chuckled. "That's the polite way of saying it looks like hell." "No," she said. "It looks honest." He turned surprised. She met his eyes for the first time without the sunglasses. They were a stormy gray-blue, guarded, but not unkind. He didn't press her. Jack spent the next hour assessing the damage while Charlotte sat on an overturned milk crate scrolling her phone, though she didn't seem to be actually reading anything, just tapping, staring, scrolling again. "You're not from around here," he said eventually. She looked up. What gave it away, the heels or the watch? He smirked. The Cadillac. Charlotte tilted her head. "Most people assume I'm lost." Jack wiped his hands on a fresh rag. "Are you?" The question hung in the air a second longer than it should have. Then she stood brushing off imaginary dust from her trousers. "Can you fix it?" she asked, changing the subject. "I can," he said, "but I'll need to order a new hose and flush the radiator system. That'll take a day or two depending on delivery." She nodded. "Is there a hotel nearby, sort of?" He scratched the back of his neck. "Motel down by the main road. But if you're not fussy, I've got a spare room upstairs. It's not the Ritz, but it's got AC and clean sheets." Charlotte raised an eyebrow. "You offer all your stranded customers a room?" Jack shrugged. "Only the ones with interesting cars." She smiled, genuine this time. "All right, I'll take the room." That night Jack made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. Charlotte ate slowly, methodically, as if remembering how. They didn't talk much, but it wasn't awkward. Just quiet. After dinner, she stood at the garage's open door, looking out at the desert sky, lavender and gold melting into indigo. Jack joined her, sipping coffee. "Nice out here," she murmured. "Peaceful," Jack replied. "You don't get that in the city." "No," she said. "You really don't." For a long moment they just stood there. Two strangers. Two ghosts. Sharing silence. And something else. Something like the beginning of something neither of them had planned for. The morning sun cracked through the blinds like a slow-moving blade, slicing across the hardwood floor and onto Charlotte's face. She blinked once, disoriented, sitting upright on the unfamiliar mattress in the small, tidy room above the garage. The walls were bare except for a faded frame photograph. Two boys and a man in uniform, their grins caught forever, in black and white. She rubbed her temples. She hadn't meant to sleep in. She hadn't meant to sleep that well either. Downstairs, the clinking of tools and the soft grind of metal on metal told her Jack was already working. Charlotte slid her shoes on, took a moment to smooth her blouse, and descended the narrow staircase that led directly into the heart of his world. The garage was alive. Sunlight poured through the side window, casting golden angles across an organized chaos of grease-stained benches, hanging belts, and parts that looked older than she was. The scent of warm oil and old rubber filled the air. Jack stood with his back to her, bent over the open hood of the Eldorado. He moved with precision, focus steady, no wasted motion. Charlotte stood quietly watching. Jack didn't look up. "Coffee's on the hot plate in the corner," he said as though reading her mind. She moved toward it, nodding silently, even though he couldn't see her. The mug was chipped, but clean. The coffee was strong, black as pitch, the kind that clung to your bones and woke up your regrets. She took a sip, winced slightly, then smiled to herself. "You're up early," she said. Jack finally turned, wiping his hands on a rag. "I sleep when there's nothing to fix. That ever happen?" He gave a half smile. "Not often." Charlotte walked over to the Eldorado, running a fingertip along the fender. "She means something to you." Jack's brow lifted. "She means something to you. Most people don't just drive a piece of American history into the desert." She hesitated. "Then it was my father's." Jack nodded, once respectful, a man of taste. "He died 5 years ago," she added, voice softer. "I've kept the car in storage. Figured I'd bring her out for a drive." She didn't add, "and to get as far away from the rest of my life as possible." That part didn't need to be said. Jack studied her, his expression unreadable. "Still runs better than most of what I see." Charlotte sipped her coffee, letting the silence settle again. But this time it wasn't awkward. There was something about the garage, it absorbed things. Noise, pain, even memories. As if the air itself was used to carrying heavy things. "You live here alone?" she asked, not prying, just curious. Jack nodded. "Yeah, family." He glanced over at the photograph on the wall, then back at the engine. "Had a brother. Nate. Younger. Passed a while back." Charlotte waited, giving him room. "He came back from overseas, but he didn't really come back, you know," Jack said, tightening a bolt. "Some wounds don't bleed on the outside." She felt a flicker of ache in her chest. The kind of ache you only recognize when it matches your own. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Jack shrugged, but it was the kind of shrug that meant I carry it every day. "I used to be in the Marines," he said after a beat. "Mechanical engineer. When I got out, I couldn't stand the idea of working behind a desk. Started fixing engines again. Opened this place. Kept me sane. Charlotte looked around. It's more than just a garage. He nodded. Yeah. It's memory, muscle memory, heart memory. These machines, they don't lie to you. If they're broken, they let you know. If you treat them right, they'll last longer than we do. She watched him for a long moment, something shifting inside her. There was no bravado in him, no performance, just a quiet integrity that felt rare in her world. I used to believe in building things too, she said. But somewhere along the way, the people I built with stopped caring about why, only about how much. Jack glanced at her. That why you're out here, Charlotte exhaled. That and I stopped knowing what I was supposed to fight for. He didn't respond immediately, just turned back to the engine, fiddling with a wrench. Well, around here we mostly fight rust-busted hoses and the occasional scorpion. You're welcome to join. A small laugh escaped her lips. It surprised both of them. By noon, Jack had the radiator flushed and the cracked hose removed. The new part wouldn't arrive until the next morning, so there was nothing to do but wait. Charlotte offered to help clean up, and to Jack's quiet amusement, she insisted on organizing a tool drawer that had apparently gone untouched since 2003. You're alphabetizing my wrenches, he said, raising an eyebrow. I'm restoring order to chaos, she replied. They shared lunch on the bench just outside the garage, 2 turkey sandwiches and a pair of sodas from the old vending machine out back. The desert heat shimmered on the horizon, but the shade was cool, the breeze gentle. You're not what I expected, Charlotte said. Jack took a bite of his sandwich. What did you expect, she considered. Someone bitter, someone buried. He looked out toward the road. There were years like that. What changed? I stopped waiting for the world to fix me. He glanced at her. You ever stop waiting? Charlotte stared at the distance, the tips of her shoes brushing the gravel. Maybe, she said. Maybe that's why I ended up here. They sat in silence again, but this time it was more than comfortable, it was necessary. Something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, not of love, not yet, but of a shared stillness. Of 2 people whose past were heavy, whose present was uncertain, and whose future, for the first time in a long time, had stopped moving away from them. The stars came out like tiny silver nails hammered into the black velvet of the desert sky. Jack had forgotten how quiet it could get at night. No traffic, hum, no neon buzz, just the far-off cry of a coyote and the slow creak of wind through old metal. The kind of quiet that didn't ask for your attention, but demanded your honesty. He stood at the edge of the garage, arms crossed, a cup of coffee cooling in his hand. Across the lot, Charlotte sat in one of the old aluminum chairs he'd left out near the rusted fire drum. She didn't say anything, just looked up, chin tilted slightly, as if she were listening for something she wasn't sure existed. Jack didn't want to interrupt. He didn't trust silence often. In his experience, silence had a way of slipping into your ribs, pressing against the soft places you tried to hide. But there was something different about this one. Maybe it was the way Charlotte didn't seem afraid of it, or maybe it was that for the first time in years he wasn't. He cleared his throat gently. Want a refill? She glanced over and smiled faintly. I think I'm good. It's stronger than jet fuel. He chuckled, walking over to sit across from her. He passed her the thermos anyway. She took it just for the warmth. The air smelled faintly of oil and juniper. A wind passed, stirring a wisp of hair across her cheek. She didn't brush it away. Jack noticed but said nothing. How long have you been out here? She asked quietly. Since '09. He took a slow sip. After I got out. She nodded slowly as if filing that detail away. You ever think about leaving? Thought about it. Plenty, Jack said. But thinking and doing aren't always friends. Charlotte let out a soft breath. No, they're not. She fell silent for a moment, then tilted her head, looking at him. You seem steady, like someone who's made peace with things. Jack looked into the distance. The moonlight reflected off the roof of a wrecked Ford that hadn't run in a decade. I'm not sure peace is the right word. Maybe just settled. Charlotte turned the thermos in her hands. I used to be steady, or at least I thought I was. I knew how to calculate risk, make tough calls, survive boardrooms full of billion-dollar egos. But somewhere in the middle of it all, I stopped sleeping through the night. Jack watched her. She hadn't shared much before. Not really. But now under the cover of stars and caffeine, something was loosening in her. Bad dreams, he asked gently. She shook her head. No. Worse. No dreams at all. Just this gray noise. Like I was still running meetings in my sleep. Like there was no line between who I was and what I did. He didn't interrupt. And then one day she continued, I walked out in the middle of a shareholders meeting. I left my laptop, my phone, my purse. I just walked out, got in that car, and drove. Jack was quiet for a long moment. That's a hell of a thing to do. It didn't feel brave, she said. It felt like drowning. He nodded. Sometimes leaving doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like gravity. Charlotte looked over at him, her eyes catching the light in a way that made them seem older than the rest of her face. Did you ever leave something behind? Jack looked down at his boots. Yeah, I left someone behind who didn't get to leave. She didn't press him. Didn't need to. There was something sacred about the space between their stories, like two tired travelers meeting at a halfway place, not to fix each other, but to rest. You know, she said softly, this place of yours, it's not just grease and wrenches. It breathes. Jack raised an eyebrow. That a compliment or a warning? It's a compliment, she smiled. You made something real here. You know how rare that is. He shrugged, uncomfortable under praise. It's just a garage. She leaned back in her chair, looking up again. It's more than that. It's quiet, but not empty. Jack looked at her now, not just as a stranger passing through, not just as a woman who happened to own a rare car. There was something about the way she sat there, self-contained yet open, the way she looked like someone who used to carry the world and only just realized she didn't have to. I don't get many people staying here, he said. I can tell, she replied. Not that I mind, he added. There was a beat. I don't either. They both smiled, not looking at each other, but toward the stars like two old souls, finally letting the night hold their weight for a while. Later, Charlotte climbed the stairs to the spare room again. The floorboards creaked beneath her as she set the thermos on the nightstand and sat at the edge of the bed. She didn't turn the lamp on. Instead, she stared into the shadows, listening to the slow pulse of desert life through the open window. A breeze, a rustle, the faint sound of Jack closing up downstairs. And for the first time in months, maybe years, her shoulders relaxed. She wasn't home, but she also wasn't lost. Not tonight. Downstairs, Jack stood by the tool bench, running his fingers over the hood of the Eldorado. The engine would be whole again tomorrow, but something had already shifted. Not in the car. In him. She'd come out of nowhere, this woman in white, and somehow she'd brought something with her. Not chaos, not drama, stillness. And in that stillness, a question he hadn't asked himself in a long time crept up like a whisper. What if there's still something more? Jack shut off the lights, letting the night take the garage. He didn't have the answer yet, but for once he was willing to listen for it. The morning was cooler than expected, the desert wind carrying with it a crispness that hinted at the changing season. Jack was already under the hood of the Eldorado. By the time Charlotte came downstairs, her hair loosely tied back, wearing the same clothes from the day before, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She looked more at ease in worn denim than she ever had in designer suits, though he'd only known her in the former. He didn't say anything when she stepped into the garage, just nodded toward the toolbox. Mind handing me the 3/8 socket? Charlotte hesitated, then bent over the red box, scanning until she found it. She handed it to him with a look of mild satisfaction. You sure you don't want me doing payroll instead? She asked. Jack grinned. Don't tempt me. I haven't filed taxes properly since 2017. She laughed, genuine and clear. The sound echoed off the metal walls, settling between old bolts and silent memories. They worked like that for a while, Jack giving quiet instructions, Charlotte following them with unexpected precision. She was quick, focused, careful with her hands. Not the kind of person who grew up turning wrenches, but one who'd spent years learning how to adapt in any room with any tool. After tightening the final clamp on the new radiator hose, Jack stepped back and wiped his hands. That's it. She's whole again. Charlotte glanced at the Eldorado, her eyes lingering on its smooth curves, like she was looking at something more than just a car. Jack noticed. You want to drive her? She blinked. Now keys are in the ignition. For a moment, she didn't move. Then almost carefully, Charlotte walked around to the driver's side and slid behind the wheel. Her fingers rested lightly on the steering wheel, reverent. She didn't start the engine yet. Instead, she traced the worn leather with her fingertips, eyes distant. This car, she murmured, was my father's pride. He rebuilt it himself over 10 years. He used to say it was the one thing in his life that always responded when he gave it care. Jack stood a few feet away, arms crossed, listening. When I was little, I'd sit in the passenger seat while he tuned the radio, telling me stories about driving down the Pacific Coast Highway with my mom before she got sick. After she passed, he still drove it, always alone. Said it helped him remember who he was. She paused, voice softening. After he died, I stored it. Couldn't bring myself to sell it, couldn't bring myself to drive it either. It felt too much, like I wasn't allowed. Jack stepped closer. You are now. Charlotte turned the key. The Eldorado roared to life, then settled into a low, steady purr, elegant and powerful like a lion resting in the sun. She sat still for a moment, eyes closed. Then she opened them, shifted the car into gear, and slowly pulled out of the garage. The back roads around the edge of town were wide and quiet, surrounded by brush and broken fences, the landscape dipping into the valley like a soft breath. Charlotte drove slowly, her grip steady. Jack sat in the passenger seat, arm resting on the door, watching her more than the road. You look like someone remembering how to breathe, he said. She smiled faintly. I forgot this feeling. The engine under you, the windows down, the sound of tires over gravel. It's like everything else disappears. Jack nodded. It's the closest thing I've found to peace. Charlotte glanced at him, serious now. What else did you leave behind, Jack? He hesitated. The wind moved through the open windows, tugging at the silence. My brother Nate, he said finally. He was younger, brighter, always wanted to serve like me. But he came back, hollow, tried to make it look normal. Held a job, paid bills, smiled at holidays. But he was drowning, and I missed it. Charlotte's hands tightened slightly on the wheel. One day I came home and he was gone, Jack said. Left a note that just said, I'm sorry I couldn't stay. I found it on the workbench beside an old carburetor he'd been cleaning. I never finished that engine. Still can't touch it. Charlotte's voice was soft. That's why you built the garage. He nodded. Had to build something I could hold together, even if I couldn't fix myself. She drove in silence for a minute, the weight of his confession settling gently between them. I know that kind of grief, she said. Mine just wore a different suit. Jack didn't ask. He let her say what she wanted to say, and nothing more. Charlotte pulled the car into a clearing near an old dried-out creek bed. The view stretched for miles, low hills, dusky sagebrush, the sharp blue sky pressing down on them like a blanket of truth. She shut off the engine. It's strange, she murmured. I left everything behind, my board seat, my apartment, my phone, and I thought I'd feel lost. But I'm not. Jack looked at her. What do you feel? She met his eyes. Still, for the first time in years. The wind picked up, carrying dust and the distant scent of creosote. Charlotte turned her body toward him, legs curled slightly in the seat. Why did you offer me that room, Jack? You didn't know me. For all you knew, I could have been lying about everything. Jack leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You look tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind that needs a quiet place and someone who won't ask too much. Her eyes searched his, and now he didn't flinch. Now I think maybe I needed someone to share the quiet with. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Charlotte leaned back against the leather seat, eyes half-lidded, letting the warmth of the sun melt into her bones. I don't know where I'm going next, she said. You don't have to know today, Jack replied. They drove back to the garage in silence, but not emptiness. It was the silence of something beginning, of two broken, unfinished lives brushing gently against each other. No declarations, no promises, just a kind of mutual recognition. You too, yes, me too. By late afternoon, the sun had begun its slow descent, casting long amber shadows across the desert floor. Jack leaned against the open garage door, wiping the last of the oil from his hands with an old cloth. The Eldorado sat gleaming outside her engine, purring like a satisfied cat. He just topped off her fluids, checked her tires, and polished her chrome with care that bordered on reverence. Inside the garage, Charlotte appeared at the top of the stairs, her silhouette framed by golden light. She had changed into a simple cotton shirt and jeans that looked more natural on her now than the corporate armor she used to wear. She descended slowly, a hesitant smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Ready for round two?" Jack asked, tossing the rag aside. Charlotte gave a playful glance at the Eldorado. "I thought I'd already passed the test." He shrugged. "Desert roads are tricky. You've driven straight, let's try winding." Her eyes narrowed with mock suspicion. "You're not luring me into some kind of off-road survival challenge, are you?" Jack grinned. "Only if you consider fresh air and no cell reception a test of survival." Minutes later, they were cruising out of town along a narrow road that twisted along the base of a red rock ridge. The Eldorado handled the curves like a swan in water, elegant, steady, and patient. Charlotte drove with a confidence that came from muscle memory, her body leaning slightly into the turns, one hand resting gently on the wheel. The scenery unfolded like a painted scroll, jagged cliffs, sweeping arroyos, scattered sage. It was all so wide, so open, that even the smallest details seemed louder. A hawk circling above a rabbit darting across the shoulder, the subtle creak of old leather seats. Jack rolled down his window, letting the wind wash over him. "There's an old lookout a few miles ahead," he said, his voice raised slightly over the breeze. "Used to go there with my brother when we needed to think." Charlotte nodded. "Let's see it." But just as they rounded the next bend, the road ahead vanished. A landslide had come through recently, judging by the still drifting dust. Rocks, broken tree limbs, and a thick coat of mud covered the narrow pass. Charlotte slammed the brakes gently, the Eldorado jerking to a stop. For a long moment, neither of them said a word. Jack opened the door and stepped out, surveying the scene. The road behind them was narrow and winding. Backing out would be risky. Ahead was impassable. Charlotte joined him, crossing her arms as she took in the mess. "Well, so much for your lookout." Jack cracked a smile. "That's Arizona for you. Beauty one minute, chaos the next." She turned to him. "Now what?" "There's a service road a few hundred yards down, cuts through the hills," Jack said. "Unpaved, but if we take it slow, we can loop around." They got back in the car this time with Jack behind the wheel. As they turned off onto the dirt road, the ride grew rougher. The tires kicked up dust and gravel, and the Eldorado, bless her suspension, groaned with every bump. The road twisted through a narrow pass flanked by red cliffs on one side and steep drops on the other. Jack kept both hands firm on the wheel, eyes scanning ahead. Charlotte braced herself on the door, peering out. "How do you even find a place like this to live?" Jack shrugged. "Didn't find it. It found me. After everything with Nate, I just needed space. Quiet. Somewhere no one expected anything from me." She nodded slowly. "I understand that more than I want to admit." Jack glanced at her. "You ever think about going back to your company?" Charlotte was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "I built it from nothing. We were supposed to change the industry, more sustainable builds, better ethics. But then came the investors, the growth mandates. I started making decisions that didn't feel like mine anymore. When I found out they'd covered up a faulty battery prototype to save a launch date, She stopped. "You couldn't stay," Jack said. She shook her head. "No, but I didn't know how to leave either. Not until I just did." The road curved again, and just as Jack steered into the turn, a sudden dip caught the rear tire. The Eldorado lurched violently to the side. Jack fought the wheel, trying to steady her, but the rear slid into soft gravel. The car tilted toward the edge. "Hang on," he shouted, foot slamming the brake. Dust flew. Charlotte grabbed the handle above the window, her body tense. For a heart-pounding second, the car teetered. Then it stopped. Jack exhaled, slow and deliberate. They sat frozen, the edge of the world visible, just feet from the passenger door. "Well," Charlotte said, voice shaky. "That got interesting." Jack chuckled under his breath. "You okay?" She nodded. "Still have a pulse. That counts for something." He shifted into reverse, easing the car back onto level ground inch by inch. When they were finally upright again, both of them released the breath they hadn't realized they were holding. "I think I've had enough desert adventure for one day," Charlotte said. "Agreed?" They turned around, retracing the winding path back toward the highway. This time the conversation slowed. The adrenaline of the near slip lingered between them, an unspoken reminder that control was always an illusion. When they finally reached the paved road again, Charlotte glanced at him. "I can't remember the last time I felt something real," she said softly. Jack looked over, eyebrows raised. "That feeling," she added. "Fear, relief, being completely present. Everything in my world for the past few years has been screens, forecasts, spin. But out here on that edge, I was alive. Jack's voice was steady. That's what machines do. They strip everything away except what matters. That's why I never left them. She smiled just a little, and why I think I might stay near them a while longer. They pulled into the garage just as the sun slipped below the ridge, casting the sky in copper and rose. Jack killed the engine and turned to her. Dinner's on me. You okay with grilled cheese and tomato soup? Charlotte looked at him, her expression warm and calm. That might be the best offer I've had all year. They got out of the car, closing the doors behind them, the echoes of the drive still in their bones. Neither of them knew what the next day would bring, but tonight they'd survived the curve. Together. The morning air held a strange stillness, as if the desert itself was waiting. Jack stood beneath the hood of a pickup truck that had limped in the night before with a failing transmission. He moved with his usual calm, the motions of wrench and socket as familiar to him as breath, but his thoughts weren't on the truck. They were on her, Charlotte. It had been nearly a week since she arrived, half by accident, half by fate, and everything since had shifted in quiet, undeniable ways. The rhythm of the garage, the silence of the night, even the way the sunlight fell across the floorboards upstairs. He found himself noticing things that hadn't mattered before, like the mug she always used for coffee, chipped near the handle, or the way she folded her sleeves exactly 3 turns, or how her eyes drifted to the horizon when she thought no one was watching. He didn't know what to call it yet, but it wasn't nothing. Just as he leaned into the engine, a low rumble echoed from the road, sharp, distinct, corporate. Jack straightened, narrowing his eyes as a black SUV kicked up dust down the long drive. Behind it, a silver sedan followed, clean as a showroom floor. Jack wiped his hands on a rag, instincts pricking. Those weren't locals. Those were suits, and they were looking for someone. He didn't have to guess who. The SUV came to a stop, doors opening, in practice sync. A tall man in a tailored jacket stepped out first, followed by a woman in heels too sharp for the terrain. Behind them, a third figure remained in the car, eyes obscured by tinted glass. Jack crossed his arms, expression unreadable. Help you folks with something. The tall man pulled off his sunglasses, revealing eyes that didn't match his smile. We're looking for Charlotte Green. We were told she might be here. Before Jack could answer, Charlotte stepped out from the garage's side door, a rag in one hand and a smudge of grease on her wrist. She paused when she saw them, her shoulders tensed. Bryce, she said quietly. Charlotte, the man replied, as if her name tasted expensive. You had us worried. She didn't smile. I doubt that. You've gone dark, he said, approaching. No calls, no emails. The board's been circling. Investors are on edge. You know how this looks. I don't care how it looks, she said. Her voice was flat, steady. I walked away. That wasn't a request. It was a decision. You don't get to disappear, the woman in heels chimed in, clearly annoyed. There are contracts, public obligations. You're still the face of the company. Jack stepped slightly forward, his tone calm but unmistakably firm. She's not under contract here. And last I checked, this isn't a boardroom. Bryce's eyes shifted to Jack, appraising. And you are just the guy fixing her car, Jack said, and making sure she's left alone if she wants to be. Bryce smiled thinly. I see. A mechanic. Charming. Charlotte's jaw clenched, but she held her ground. You don't get to talk down to him, Bryce. Not after everything you let happen. We were protecting the brand, the woman cut in. You know how much was at stake. At stake, Charlotte's voice sharpened. We buried a fire hazard behind marketing spin. You silenced a whistleblower. I didn't walk away from that, I ran. The third passenger stepped out of the SUV, now an older man with silver hair and a tablet in hand. He held it out. A resignation won't stop the fallout, he said. Legal still needs your statement. If you walk away without handling this properly, they'll pin it on you. Charlotte stared at the tablet. For a long moment, the world around her fell away. The hum of cicadas. The wind brushing the edge of the awning. Jack's presence beside her, quiet but solid, like a grounding wire. Then she turned back to Bryce. I'll give a statement, she said, but not for them. For the people who trusted me. The customers. The ones who bought our promises. I'll speak the truth. And if it cost me everything, so be it. Bryce stepped closer. You'll destroy what we built. Charlotte didn't flinch. then maybe it didn't deserve to stand. The silence that followed was razor sharp. Bryce finally stepped back, nodding slowly. "You've changed." Charlotte met his gaze. "No, I just finally remembered who I was before all the money." Without another word, she turned and walked back toward the garage. Jack followed, his expression unreadable, but his steps protective. Behind them, the visitors stood for a moment longer, then returned to their cars. The engine started, the dust rose, and then they were gone. Back inside, Charlotte sat heavily on the bench near the tool cabinet. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face was composed. Jack handed her a glass of water. "You handled that well." She laughed softly. "I'm not sure what I handled, but I didn't run." "No," Jack said. "You stood your ground." She looked up at him. "I've spent the last 10 years shrinking to fit places that never deserved me. I don't want to do that anymore." He nodded. "Then don't." Their eyes held for a long beat. No need for grand gestures, no speeches, just truth hanging between them like dusk. Charlotte finally exhaled. "You know they'll be back, right? Reporters' lawyers may be worse." "I know," Jack said, "but they'll have to come through me next time." She smiled, her voice softer now. "That's dangerously noble for a man who says he just fixes engines." Jack leaned on the bench beside her. "Maybe I fixed more than I thought." The garage settled around them, filled with the smell of oil and courage. Outside, the sun lowered behind the hills, casting long gold across the dirt lot. The world hadn't changed, but Charlotte had. And Jack, perhaps, was starting to believe that some things broken weren't meant to be discarded but reforged. Together. The next morning dawned cooler, the air lighter, as if the tension from the day before had finally loosened its grip. Jack stood on the porch of the garage, sipping coffee from his metal thermos. Eyes trained on the horizon. A familiar ache sat low in his chest, the kind that had no name, only weight. He didn't hear Charlotte approach until her voice broke the quiet. "You always start your day like this." He turned. She stood there in a soft, flannel shirt over jeans, hair pulled back, face bare and rested. There was something unburdened in her eyes, an echo of who she might have been before suits and deadlines and damage control. Jack offered her the thermos without a word. She took it, sipping carefully, then grimaced. "Still tastes like diesel." He smirked. "That's how you know it's working." They stood there for a moment, just breathing. No rush, no pressure. Then Charlotte spoke, her voice steadier than he expected. "I'm not going back." Jack didn't look at her right away. He kept his eyes on the far-off ridges, as if the desert might offer confirmation. "You sure?" he asked quietly. "I am," she said. "I've spent years making choices that looked good on paper, ones that pleased investors, protected brands, stroked egos. But not once did I stop to ask what I wanted." Jack finally turned to face her. "And what do you want?" Charlotte looked out at the garage, the lot, the dirt road that had brought her there. "I want something real, not flashy, not perfect, just honest." She paused. "I want to build again, but not the way I used to. Not with people who only care about margins and market dominance." Jack raised an eyebrow. "And who are you planning to build with?" Charlotte gave a small smile. "That depends. How busy are you next month?" He let out a quiet laugh. "Depends. Are we talking about building an engine or an empire?" "Neither," she said. "Something smaller, something better." She stepped forward, pulling a folded paper from her back pocket and handing it to him. Jack opened it, brow furrowing. It was a sketched layout, simple but clear. A garage, a classroom, a service bay. Handwritten notes scribbled in the margins. Mentorship, veterans welcome, community programs, skill building for teens. He looked up. "You drew this?" Charlotte nodded. "Last night. Couldn't sleep." Jack studied the paper again. "This is a school." "It's a garage," she said, "and a second chance. For kids who've been counted out. For vets who don't fit back in. For anyone who needs a place to work with their hands and feel proud again." She held his gaze. "I can't run a billion-dollar company anymore, Jack. But maybe I can help build something that still matters." Jack's throat tightened. He folded the paper carefully, like it was something sacred, and slipped it into his back pocket. "That's a hell of a blueprint," he said. Charlotte tilted her head. "Will you help me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the garage, the tools hanging like old friends, the grease-stained floor, the Eldorado parked quietly in the corner. Then back at her. I've spent the last 15 years fixing machines because I couldn't fix people, he said. But maybe this is how we do both. Charlotte's voice softened. So is that a yes? Jack smiled slow and steady. That's a hell yes. Later that day, Jack drove into town with Charlotte in the passenger seat. She insisted on riding along to the hardware store, said she needed to learn the difference between a torque wrench and a crescent wrench if she was going to co-run a garage. They stopped at the diner afterward, one of those classic joints with cracked leather booths and a waitress who called everyone honey. The regulars glanced up when they walked in two familiar strangers who somehow already looked like they belonged. Jack ordered a black coffee and a BLT. Charlotte surprised him by ordering the same. Over lunch, they talked about layout ideas, about sourcing tools, about starting small and smart. Jack told her about a kid named Eli who used to hang around his garage on Saturdays until he got swept up into trouble and disappeared. Charlotte made a note on her napkin. Find Eli, offer him a spot. You're serious about this, Jack said, watching her. I've never been more serious about anything, she said. As they walked back to the truck, the late afternoon light casting soft shadows across the sidewalk, Jack reached into his pocket and handed her something small and greasy. It was a key. Charlotte looked down at it, confused. What's this? To the garage, Jack said. You'll need it if you're going to open up before me. She stared at it for a long moment, emotion flickering across her features like sunlight through trees. Then she slid it onto her keyring without a word. That night, the garage was quiet again. Jack stood in the workshop, the sketch still pinned to the corkboard. A warm breeze moved through the open window, rustling the blueprints and bringing with it a scent of possibility. Charlotte sat at the workbench beside him, elbows on the table grease under her nails. This is the first time I've felt like I'm doing something that can't be bought, she said. Something no one can take. Jack looked at her, his voice low. That's because it's real. She turned toward him. Thank you for seeing me before I saw myself. He gave a small shake of his head. I didn't fix anything. You did that. No, she said, voice barely a whisper. You gave me the space to breathe again. That's not nothing. For a moment, they just looked at each other. No grand declarations, no promises. But something had shifted again. This time not in the air, but in them. And it would not shift back. The phone rang just past midnight. It wasn't loud, but in the stillness of the garage apartment, it sounded like a fire alarm. Jack sat up in bed, his back stiff, a lifetime of instinct, waking him faster than thought. The number on the screen wasn't familiar, but it had a local area code. He answered anyway. Jack Turner. The voice was young, tight with nerves. Yes, speaking. This is Karen from the Marlowe Youth Shelter. I got your number from Eli's phone. He's here, but he's hurt. He asked for you. Jack's blood chilled. He swung his legs over the side of the bed. What happened? Some kind of fight. I don't know the details, but he was jumped outside the convenience store on Monroe. He didn't want to go to the hospital. He just asked if we could call you. Said you were his only safe place. Jack was already pulling on his jeans. Tell him I'm coming. Charlotte stirred in the room across the hallway as he moved downstairs, the soft creak of her door opening behind him. Jack, her voice was sleepy but alert. He turned, pausing only to grab his keys and boots. There's a kid I used to mentor, Eli. He's in trouble. Shelter just called. I'm coming with you. You don't have to, I'm not asking. They drove in silence at first. The road stretched long and dark ahead, only the headlights cutting through the empty night. Jack gripped the wheel tighter than usual, knuckles white. Charlotte broke the silence. Tell me about him. Eli. Jack's jaw tensed. Smart kid. Too smart for his own good. His mom left when he was 6, Dad's a drunk. He used to come by the garage after school just to tinker, get out of the house. I taught him how to gap spark plugs. He taught me how to play poker badly. She smiled gently, but Jack didn't return it. I lost track of him about a year ago, he continued. He stopped showing up. I figured the streets pulled him in. Happens more than I like to admit. Charlotte said nothing, but the weight of his words settled between them. The youth shelter was a squat brick building tucked behind a church on the rougher edge of town. Jack pulled into the lot, headlights sweeping across chain-link fencing and a worn-out basketball hoop that leaned slightly to one side. Inside, the lights were dim. A staff member led them to a back room where Eli sat on a cot knees, drawn up, his face swollen on one side. A butterfly bandage crossed his cheek. His shirt was torn at the collar. He looked up as Jack entered. "Hey," the boy said, voice rough. Jack crossed the room in 2 strides and crouched beside him. "Jesus, Eli." "You all right?" Eli shrugged, trying for nonchalance. "Took a bad bet." "Didn't think they jumped me for it." Jack frowned. "Who did this?" Eli avoided his eyes. "Doesn't matter. Just didn't know who else to call." Charlotte stood in the doorway, quietly observing. Jack glanced back at her, then turned to Eli again. "You did right. Calling me." Eli hesitated. "They're going to kick me out. They said I broke curfew too many times." "We'll deal with that later," Jack said. "Right now, we're getting you out of here." Karen, the staff member, stepped forward nervously. "Technically, he's past the age limit to stay. We try to make exceptions, but—" Jack stood. "He's coming with me." Karen nodded, relieved more than resistant. "Just sign him out." Back in the truck, Eli slumped in the back seat, trying to look casual but clearly in pain. Charlotte turned and passed him a bottle of water from the glove box. "Thanks," he mumbled. Jack didn't speak until they were halfway home. Then, glancing at Eli in the mirror, he said, "You still remember how to strip a wire?" "Yeah," Eli replied, surprised. "Good. Because starting tomorrow, you're helping me rewire the back bay. And if you show up hungover or missing again, I swear I'll put you to work sorting nuts and bolts for 8 hours straight." Eli grinned despite himself. "Sounds like hell." Jack cracked a smile. "Exactly." Charlotte looked over at him, a softness in her expression he didn't see but somehow felt. Back at the garage, Jack led Eli to the old cot in the storage room. He tossed him a clean blanket. "It's not fancy," Jack said, "but it's safe." Eli looked up. "Why are you doing this, Jack?" After all this time, Jack paused, then sat on the edge of the desk across the room. "Because someone gave me a second chance once," he said, "and because I know what it feels like to not have anyone left to call." Eli nodded slowly, laying back. Within minutes, he was asleep. Outside, the wind had picked up again. Jack stood in the dark, arms folded across his chest. Charlotte joined him a moment later, her arms wrapped around herself for warmth. "Will he be all right?" she asked. Jack exhaled. "He's got a shot now. That's more than he had yesterday." Charlotte looked up at the stars, cold, brilliant points of light against the endless black. "I want this to be part of the plan," she said. "The school, the garage, a space for kids like Eli, for men like you, people who don't fit the mold anymore or never did." Jack turned to her. "Are you sure this isn't some pet project, Charlotte? It'll be hard, messy. It won't impress donors or make headlines." She met his gaze. "I don't want donors. I want impact. And I want to build something that matters with you." Something tightened in his chest at those last 2 words. "With you." He didn't say anything for a long while. Then quietly, "That's the first time anyone said that to me in a long time." Charlotte stepped a little closer. "Then maybe we both needed this night more than we realized." In the quiet, with the stars above and a second chance heart beating softly in the room behind them, something unspoken passed between them. A choice, a beginning, and neither one of them turned away from it. The next morning arrived with the smell of rain clinging to the wind, an unusual gift in the Arizona desert. Jack stood beneath the awning of the garage, mug in hand, watching faint storm clouds drift across the horizon. He didn't mind the change in weather. It felt like a turning point. Inside, Eli sat at the long metal table near the tool cabinet, organizing sockets into trays, while Charlotte showed him how to scan inventory into an app she'd downloaded. Jack smiled faintly to himself. 2 days ago, the kid was bruised and silent. Now he was focused, nodding, as Charlotte explained how the new layout system would make ordering more efficient. Jack stepped inside, nodding toward them. "Eli, what's our productivity rating this morning?" Eli looked up, grinning. "I already filed your torque wrenches by size and condition. That's worth at least a B-." "I'll take it," Jack said. "Coffee's fresh if either of you want." Charlotte reached for her mug, then paused. "Actually, I think today's the day." Jack raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For the pitch." She walked to the corkboard near the back wall, the one Jack had cleared 2 days earlier, to pin up Charlotte's sketch, the simple but ambitious blueprint of their new vision, part garage, part trade school, part safe haven. The paper fluttered slightly as she tapped it. I want to start making this real, she said. But we're going to need help funding Partners Space Tools. More than what we can buy with elbow grease and goodwill. Jack crossed his arms, eyeing the plan. You want to go public with it? Not to the media, she said, but to the right people. There's a woman I used to know, retired Navy officer, runs a foundation in Flagstaff now. Funds small community education programs. She's wary of corporate pitches, but if we can show her what we're trying to do, what we are doing here with Eli, she might listen. Jack nodded slowly. And you want to drive up there today? Charlotte hesitated. I want us to drive up there. Together. He didn't answer right away. The idea of leaving the garage, even for a day, made him itch, but he also knew that some chances didn't come twice. Eli looked up from the table. I can watch the place. It's not like I don't know where the tools are. Jack glanced at him. You sure? Eli smirked. Come on, man. You taught me how to rebuild a carburetor when I was 13. I think I can handle a phone call or two. Jack sighed. Fine. Just don't let the coffee pot overflow. Eli gave a mock salute. By midday, Jack and Charlotte were on the road again, this time in her car, a silver electric sedan that hummed more than it roared. The sleek dashboard and touchscreen controls made Jack feel like he was riding inside a spaceship, but he said nothing. Charlotte noticed anyway. It's okay. You can make fun of it. I wasn't going to say anything, Jack said, eyes on the road ahead. But I do miss the sound of a real engine. She smiled. It's efficient. It's quiet, he muttered. Too quiet. She let that hang in the air before adding, You know, this is the first time I've asked someone to build something with me. Not for me. Jack turned toward her, surprised. That true? She nodded. I was always the one steering the ship. Everyone else just held oars. But this feels different, like it belongs to both of us. Jack stared ahead for a moment, then said, That's because it does. They drove in thoughtful silence the rest of the way, winding through desert hills and up into the cooler elevation of Flagstaff. Pines replaced cacti, and the air took on the sharp scent of rain-soaked needles. It was a quiet contrast to the arid land they'd left behind. The foundation's office sat in a converted firehouse near downtown red brick ivy. Crawling along one side, the front doors painted a clean slate gray. Inside, the space was warm and unpretentious, with soft lighting and walls lined with photos of past projects, kids welding, veterans speaking at podiums, mechanics teaching workshops under steel beams. They were greeted by a lean, steel-haired woman in a navy blouse and jeans. Her name was Maya Reed, and she had the unmistakable bearing of someone who once commanded a room full of people who followed her without question. Charlotte Green, she said, extending a hand. Didn't expect to see you in my neck of the woods. Charlotte smiled. I figured it was time I showed up for something other than press conferences. Maya's gaze shifted to Jack. And you are Jack Turner, he said. Mechanic, veteran, formerly stubborn hermit. Maya raised an eyebrow. Good mix. Come on back. They sat at a long table made of reclaimed wood. Maya listened as Charlotte spoke, brief but passionate, about the garage, the plan, the kids like Eli, who'd been forgotten by the system, but still had hands eager to build. Jack chimed in where it mattered, talking about what dignity meant to someone who'd lost their footing, about how turning a wrench could be more than work, it could be restoration. When they finished, Maya sat back, eyes narrowed in thought. Sounds ambitious, she said, and grounded. I like that tension. Most people have one or the other, not both. Charlotte stayed silent. Maya continued. I've got funds earmarked for exactly this kind of initiative. Small scale, high impact. But I'm not just writing checks. I want site visits, progress reports, transparency. Jack leaned in. Then you'll get all of that. And more. Maya studied him for a moment, then gave a slow, satisfied nod. I'll fund your first 6 months, she said. If what you've said holds up, we'll talk about expanding. Deal? Charlotte's breath caught just slightly. Deal. On the drive back, Jack stared out the window, the desert slowly reclaiming the landscape. You didn't flinch, he said quietly. Charlotte looked over. At what? At being vulnerable, putting the plan out there, asking for help. She smiled. Maybe I've learned a few things from someone who's not afraid to get his hands dirty. He turned to her, his voice low. You really want to do this? For real with me? She didn't hesitate. There's no one else I'd trust more. He nodded, then looked back out at the road, watching the last of the sun slip behind the hills. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like something to brace against. It felt like something to build. The smell of smoke hit Jack before he even turned the corner. It wasn't the faint, comforting scent of desert sage in the distance or someone burning leaves down the road. This was sharp, immediate, wrong. He slammed the truck into park and threw open the door, boots crunching against gravel as he sprinted the final yards toward the garage. Flames licked at the roof line like wild tongues crackling against the twilight sky. Black smoke billowed upward, painting the horizon in ash and dread. The eastern wall of the garage, where he'd stored most of the new materials, tools, and blueprints, was already engulfed. Charlotte arrived just seconds behind him, her gasp caught in her throat as she stumbled out of the truck, hands flying to her mouth. No, Jack, no. Eli stood at the far edge of the lot, coughing, his hoodie pulled over his head. He was shouting something, but the roar of the fire drowned him out. Jack didn't think. He moved. Toward the door. Toward the fire. Toward everything he had built, was building, and might now lose. Jack, Charlotte screamed, "Don't go in!" But he was already past the threshold, pulling his shirt over his nose, blinking through the stinging smoke. The heat clawed at his face. The wall near the breaker panel was scorched, and he could see where the flames had jumped to the shelves. But it wasn't the tools he was after. It was the corkboard, the blueprint, the plan that had only just been born. He tore it from the wall, singed around the edges, then stumbled backward as a beam groaned and collapsed near the far side of the shop. He turned, heart-hammering vision blurred, and pushed his way back out through the smoke and into the open air. He collapsed onto the gravel, coughing, lungs burning. Charlotte was beside him in an instant, her hands trembling as they touched his shoulders, his arms checking for injuries. "You're insane," she said, voice raw with panic. "You could have." Jack held up the blueprint. Edges blackened, corners curling, but the ink was still legible. Her breath caught. She looked at it like it was a relic. Her fingers brushed the paper, reverent. "You saved it," she whispered. Jack coughed again. "Not about to let our future go up in flames." The fire department arrived minutes later, too late to save most of the structure, but just in time to contain the blaze. The firefighters worked efficiently, dousing the flames, securing the scene, and taping off the perimeter. "Likely electrical," the captain said grimly after a brief inspection. "Could have been a frayed wire or something left on. These older buildings' fires move fast." Jack stood beside him, jaw clenched. Eli sat on the back of the truck bed, hands shaking. When Jack walked over, the boy stood. "I'm sorry," Eli blurted. I forgot to unplug the bench grinder after I finished rewiring. I didn't think." Jack placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "It was an accident," he said. "But I destroyed everything," Eli said, eyes glistening. "The new bay, the tools, the school." Jack shook his head. "You didn't destroy the school. The school isn't that building." Eli blinked. "Then what is it?" Jack pointed to the blueprint still clutched in Charlotte's hands. "It's that, and it's us. You, me, Charlotte. It's what we're building, not where we're building it." Charlotte stepped forward. "We still have our hands, our plan, and thanks to Jack, our vision." Eli looked from one to the other. "But where do we even start again?" Jack let out a slow breath. "The way we started before, one bolt at a time." The next morning, the garage was a skeleton, charred beams, blackened walls, water pooling on the concrete floor. But something had shifted. Where there had been smoke and ash, now there was motion. Neighbors stopped by with coffee, old tools, offers to help clean. A retired welder brought a portable generator. A local carpenter volunteered to draw up a new design. Charlotte stood in the middle of it all, clipboard in hand, sleeves rolled, soot on her cheek. She gave directions, asked questions, and smiled at people's names like she'd known them forever. Jack watched her with something close to awe. This wasn't the same woman who had first stepped out of the El Dorado in heels and armor. That woman had been guarded, distant, exhausted. This woman, she was raw, present, fierce with purpose. Later that day, after the last truck had pulled away and the site had quieted again, Charlotte found Jack standing at the edge of the lot, looking over the remains. She came beside him, their shoulders nearly touching. "Feels like a war zone," she said. Jack nodded. "Yeah, but we're still standing," she added. He turned to her. "I don't think I told you this before, but when my brother died, I thought I'd never build anything again. Not a life, Not a future? Not even a damn toolbox. Charlotte didn't speak, letting him continue. But now, for the first time in years, I feel like I've got something worth building. With you. She looked at him, her voice soft. Then let's build it. Not just the garage, Jack. All of it. The program. The space. The dream. She reached out and laced her fingers through his gentle but certain. And whatever comes after. Jack didn't reply with words. He didn't need to. He just squeezed her hand back steady as the ground beneath their feet. Because some things survive fire, and some things begin because of it. The first nail was driven into the new foundation on a Monday morning, just as the desert light turned gold over the ridge. There was no ribbon cutting, no speeches, no news crews, just Jack, Charlotte, Eli, and a handful of volunteers with calloused hands and quiet conviction. They didn't need ceremony. They had purpose. The weeks that followed moved in a blur of sawdust, sweat, and second chances. Framing went up, insulation, tucked in pipes, laid clean and straight. The new garage didn't try to mimic the old one. It was something else entirely. A fresh breath, a new kind of shelter. At the heart of the building stood a double-bay service area, clean and open with enough room to teach 3 students at a time. Off to the side, a workbench-lined classroom took shape, complete with whiteboards, parts, diagrams, and old engines mounted for demonstration. They painted the walls white and soft gray, the trim a cool slate blue. On the biggest wall in bold hand-stenciled letters, Charlotte insisted on the name White Road and Show. A garage for new beginnings. When Jack saw it finished, he didn't say anything. He just stood there a long while, arms crossed, heart full. "Do you like it?" Charlotte asked softly. He looked at her. "It's more than I ever imagined." She smiled. "That makes 2 of us." The official opening took place 3 months to the day after the fire. This time people did show up, neighbors, city council members, a local veterans chapter, even a few curious teenagers with sleeves rolled high and eyes wide. Charlotte had invited Maya Reed from the foundation in Flagstaff, who stood near the coffee urn with a quiet smile of approval. "I'll be honest," Maya said to Charlotte as they toured the space. "I thought you 2 might cave after the fire." "Most people do." "We're not most people," Charlotte said with a grin. "And Jack's a bit too stubborn to let smoke tell him what's possible." They reached the classroom area where Jack was showing Eli and a few teens how to strip copper wire from old alternators. The boys were laughing, focused, engaged. "You turned a pile of ash into something solid," Maya said. "That's rare." Charlotte looked at Jack, standing tall among the younger crew, teaching like he was born to do it. "No," she said. "He did." After the last guest left and the folding chairs were stacked, Charlotte found Jack alone in the back bay, wiping down a set of wrenches like it was a sacred ritual. He didn't look up when she walked in. He knew her steps now, could tell it was her, just from the rhythm. "Still polishing tools?" she asked gently. "Always," he said. "I find it calms the noise." She leaned against the wall, arms folded. "You did something today, Jack. You gave those kids more than a place to learn. You gave them something to believe in." He shrugged, eyes still on the tools. "They did the work. I just gave them a place to show up." She walked closer. "You gave me that too." He paused, finally meeting her gaze. "I used to think I was finished," he said, "like life had passed me by. I figured I'd spend my last years alone in that garage turning wrenches until my back gave out. I wasn't bitter about it, just settled." And now she asked, "Now I look at these walls, these kids and you, and I realize I never stopped hoping. I just forgot what it felt like." Charlotte's eyes shimmered. "You gave me the courage to walk away from everything I thought I had to be, and you never once asked me to be anyone but myself." "I wouldn't know how," Jack said. "You're already more than enough." There was a pause, warm and full. Charlotte stepped forward, reached into her pocket, and unfolded a piece of paper worn from being opened too many times. It was the blueprint, the original one, still scorched at the corners, but intact. "I kept it," she said. "I don't know why. Maybe because it reminded me that good things can come out of the wreckage." Jack smiled, slow and quiet. "So what now?" She didn't hesitate. "Now we build more, grow the program, train more kids, bring in more veterans, and maybe," her voice trailed off as she reached for his hand, "maybe let ourselves live a little too." Jack didn't let go. He turned to face her fully, the firelight from the last of the setting sun casting amber across her face. You ever think you'd find this? He asked. She shook her head honest. No, I thought I'd burned that bridge years ago. But sometimes the best roads don't lead back. They lead forward, into something you didn't know you were allowed to want. He leaned down, then gently, deliberately, and kissed her just once, soft and sure. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. We earned this, he said. She nodded. We did. That night, long after the lights were off and the doors locked, Jack walked through the garage one more time. The tools were in place. The floor swept. The work ahead would be hard, long, but it would matter. He passed the wall with the stenciled letters and paused. Then he reached up and placed a hand flat against the painted surface. He thought of Nate, of Eli, of Charlotte, of all the broken things he had once believed couldn't be repaired. And then he smiled. Because sometimes the ones who know how to rebuild engines are also the ones who know how to rebuild people. And sometimes, if you're lucky, they learn how to rebuild themselves along the way. The desert was quiet that morning, so quiet it felt like the world had paused to take a breath. Jack stood outside White Road & Co., the rising sun washing the building in amber light. He could hear the familiar chorus inside a socket wrench, clinking laughter echoing from the back bay, and Eli's voice instructing a new student on how to check for cylinder misfire. The air smelled of oil, coffee, and something deeper hope forged in steel and second chances. The sign out front had been freshly repainted, the white letters clean against the blue trim. White Road & Co., a garage for new beginnings underneath it. Someone, Charlotte, most likely had tacked a small metal plaque in memory of Nate Turner. For every engine that needed another chance. Jack read it every morning. Not out of grief, but out of gratitude. He carried Nate with him now, not as a weight, but as a rhythm. In every bolt turn. In every boy who learned to fix a carburetor instead of running from a fight. Charlotte appeared beside him, coffee in one hand, a clipboard in the other. She wore jeans and boots covered in paint, her hair pulled up and messy, and to Jack she'd never looked more beautiful. Morning, she said, handing him the extra mug. Morning, he replied. Busy day. She checked her notes. 3 new students starting. Maya's sending over an intern from the foundation. And the mayor wants to stop by next week, says we're the kind of story the town needs. Jack sipped his coffee, smirking. We're a story now, Charlotte smiled. Apparently. He looked at her for a long moment. You ever think we'd get here? She shook her head. No, but I think part of me always hoped. Even when I was driving aimlessly through the desert watching the world I built fall apart, I hoped there was something more. Something real. Jack nodded. This is real. Yeah, she said softly. It is. Inside, the day unfolded like a slow, steady song. Eli led a group of teens through the basics of brake calibration. His face lit up as he explained the concept like a coach breaking down a winning play. There was a new light in him, grounded, confident. He belonged here, and he knew it. Charlotte met with 2 veterans in the office, both looking for work, both uncertain. She offered them not just jobs, but purpose connection. She did it without scripts or performance. Just honesty. Grace. Jack worked alongside a student named Lucas, quiet, nervous, maybe 17. The boy didn't speak much, but his hands were steady. Jack showed him how to find a vacuum leak using smoke. When the kid finally got it, a smile broke across his face like dawn. Later, while wiping grease from his hands, Jack caught Charlotte watching him from the doorway, a tender look in her eyes. What he asked. She shook her head, voice soft. Just thinking how easy it is to fall in love with a man who rebuilds engines and lives. He paused. You're not just saying that because I finally labeled the drawers, are you? She laughed. That helped. He walked to her, slow and certain. You know, I've rebuilt a lot of things in my life, but I never thought I'd rebuild myself. Charlotte stepped closer. You didn't do it alone. Jack touched her cheek. No, I didn't. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and the garage lights dimmed to their soft, familiar hum, they gathered behind the building for the first family dinner of many. A long folding table sat under string lights filled with mismatched chairs, paper plates, and home-cooked casseroles brought in by neighbors. Someone strummed a guitar. Someone else roasted marshmallows in a makeshift fire drum. It wasn't elegant, but it was perfect. Charlotte sat beside Jack, their shoulders brushing. Eli tossed a football back and forth with one of the younger boys. The veterans who'd arrived that morning stayed late sipping coffee and smiling more than they had in years. As the laughter faded into a quiet moment, Charlotte leaned over, resting her head on Jack's shoulder. "This isn't just a garage," she whispered. "No," Jack said. "It's a beginning." They sat that way in the hush of twilight, surrounded by people who had come broken and stayed to be whole. The night air was cool but kind. The stars blinked awake one by one. Jack looked up at the sky and thought of all the miles behind him, the silence he used to live in, the grief that had weighed down his chest like rust. And now there was air, motion, light, love. He turned to Charlotte and said, "I used to think engines were the most beautiful thing I'd ever understand." She smiled, and now he kissed her gently, her hand slipping into his. "Now I know it's people." And somewhere in the distance, the sound of a rebuilt engine roared to life, not just as machinery, but as metaphor. Because sometimes when you think everything has burned down, something even stronger rises from the ashes. And sometimes, if you're lucky, the road ahead is white and wide, waiting just for you. We'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Leave us a comment and let us know what part of the world you're in. It's always a joy to see how far these stories travel and how many hearts they touch. If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply gave you a moment of peace, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. There's more where this came from, stories of love, hope, and the quiet power of human kindness. Thank you so much for watching. Your time, your presence, and your heart mean the world to us. We'll see you in the next story.